Om. Om Shri Chinmaya Sadguruve Namaha. Welcome to the esteemed panel here with us and to all of you. Just to give a brief, we have been discussing about spirituality, education, and today is the day of patriotism, as Sampadanji mentioned. We also saw the connection between the three themes. Spirituality has to be the base for education, and education has to become the base for creating nationalistic, patriotic people. If people are literate but not nationalist, means there is something wrong with the education. We also saw that in order to be spiritual, we have to understand the philosophy. The education has to result in good society, and the nationalistic fervor that we must have has to result in a glorious culture. So thus these 6 themes that we have conference are all interconnected. And we come to this most wonderful theme of patriotism and the contribution of our Puja Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda in this patriotism field. I think as Swatmananji has given such a beautiful keynote address, and a lot can be said about Puja Gurudev's views about nationalism. We will start with his basic teaching, or the crux of his entire teaching was that you change and the world around you will change. In individual redemption alone, a national redemption or progress is possible. So with this thought, let me ask first question to Anuradha ji here. Puja Gurudev always looked at patriotism from the lens of spirituality and culture. How do you think he defined patriotism in this way?
So, namaste and thank you very much. I would like to start by offering my humble pranams to Puja Gurudev for really picking us up to be on this stage to say a few words to try and highlight some of the points that he has made. I'd also like to offer my humble pranams to Gauri Ma and to all the Swamijis and Swaminijis who are present here, to all the practitioner scholars in our midst, Professor Mahadevanji, Professor Patni, Sampadananda Mishraji, and many others who are present here, as well as to all the, as I said, the Guru Bhaktas, the Jnana Bhaktas, and the Desha Bhaktas who are present here. So, thank you very much for this opportunity to share. I would just like to mention that after listening to Swami Swatmananda ji here, whatever we would say is like a ditto, because he's presented everything so brilliantly that whatever we would add on would be like, you know, in case you missed a point that he said, please listen to what we have to say. It's a little like that because he did it, he laid out everything so beautifully for us. However, since I didn't get the opportunity to listen to him earlier, I was looking through what he had said, what Gurudev had said, and I came to certain insights on the subject which I'd be very happy to present before you. So the first thing that I would like to share here is I also come from a tradition of a great patriot seer, the Sri Aurobindonian tradition. And both of the gurus have started their lives by serving the motherland, by serving this nation. And then they recognize that in order to do true justice to what this land represents and why she needed freedom, one had to live up to the spirit that she embodies in the in the League of Nations, as they say, and which is the Adhyatma dimension of it. So, an idea that came to me was such that we've been using the word patriotism, and everybody says patriotism, patriotism. So, coming from a Sanskrit background, I said, let me go to the etymology of the word and see where it comes from. So, the word patriotism comes from patriotis, or patris, which is the fatherland. And I think here there is a very distinct difference. Ours, we don't talk of fatherland, we talk of motherland. And there is patriotis, which means fellow countrymen. But if you take the lineage of the mother, then the fellow countrymen become your brethren. They're actually your own santana. They're part of the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam idea. And the word patriot, patriote in French, came to mean loyal and disinterested lover and defender of one's own country and its interests. But when we look at the word, so I tried to see if there was an equivalent of patriotism. I didn't find one. So I thought we can coin one for the 75th anniversary and use the word matriotism. So I think that what really represents the spirit of the connection that we have to our land is the idea of matriotism. And I think this spins the whole thing significantly on its head. And what it does is that when we talk of patriotism, the lineage of patriotism is significantly different, as I said, from the lineage of the matriotism. Why? Because when we grow up as a child of the mother, the love that we feel for the mother is that we're growing in her womb. It's no longer just an attachment that you have from an ideological perspective from a father's lineage, but you're actually being nurtured and nourished by every single thought that our mother has nurtured us during those 9 months of pregnancy. And that gives a very different connection of an umbilical cord with the mother. It's not just I love my, because I have a certain connection with my fellow countrymen that I will do, but it becomes my daitwa and my swabhav and swadharma to live up to the very essence and the DNA of our land. So in that context, when we talk of what is the DNA of this land, the DNA of this land lies in the question koham. And the reply to that answer is soham. So if we want to be not just bhumi putras, but matru janani putras, then the DNA of our land requires us to be aham brahmasmi. That has to be a living, embodied reality. And that is what Pujya Guruji and all were. They gave their lives, Pujya Gurudev, they gave their lives for that. And I was just thinking about it deeply when you think of what the revolutionaries were capable of doing. So if I think, that, okay, we are fellow compatriots and I have to sacrifice my life for you, of course there is a certain feeling of sacrifice for that. But when we are sacrificing, when we are ready to sacrifice our lives for the motherland whom we believe is oppressed, then the kind of tyaga bhava, the kind of deep internal connection that we feel with every member of that community is completely different. So Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam for us today has become an intellectual concept. But if you have been a revolutionary who has fought for the very existential survival of this land, then when we talk of the matriotism of Matribhumi Sevanam or Matribhumi Rakshanam, then it is the complete deep connection of the rest of the country to start with. So he started with looking at the country. The Bharatiya for him was first a political Bharatiya initially. And for that one had to live up to what the Bharata idea meant. What was it to me a Bharatiya initially? In this land immersed of light, at least we have to know what those lights were before we even think of spreading it beyond our frontiers, before we start trying to talk about something without embodying it ourselves. And then the second part would be, once the Bharata, we no longer have the need to struggle for an independent boundary line of political freedom, then that Bharatiya goes beyond and it becomes a Vishwa Bharatiya that Gurudev spoke about so powerfully, and where he was connecting everybody who connects to that essential truth. Because the very essence of this civilizational worldview is that we are children of that Amritasya Putra that Sampadanandaji talked about. So we are this Amritasya Putra, and therefore where are the boundaries? And if anybody reconnects to that Amritatva, then we become Bharatiya in the true sense. We become servers of this motherland, which was what Sri Aurobindo also said. Not just, she did not just deserve freedom because she needed to be free as a nation to do, but because the message that she had would be a liberator of mankind. And so Sri Aurobindo has this powerful quote as well, which Gurudev has said in his own words. So where he says, this was around his message for independence. He says, Mother India is not a piece of earth. She is a power, a godhead. For all nations have a Devi, and supporting their separate existence and keeping it in its being. So basically, when Sri Aurobindo and these great gurus, they looked at nations, they didn't just see them as pieces of earth. They said there is a Devi behind, there's a Shakti behind each of them. And it is to that Shakti that we have to offer our service in connection with each other. So I'll come back later. Thank you.
So wonderfully explained that Adhyatma spirituality is in the DNA of Bharatiyas. As Puja Gurudev's video also we saw, the one who revels in light, the light of knowledge, the light of self-knowledge is the one true Bharatiya. So spirituality is what Gurudev looked at as the base for patriotism. Now, coming to Narendra ji, we have seen in the history of Bharata also that whenever Bharatiyas were disconnected from our culture, we did not have that confidence, that pride in our culture. We saw that the nationalistic, patriotic feeling also go down. When that connection is gone, the light doesn't shine, like we see here also, no? When the connection is gone, the light doesn't shine. So my question is, how Gurudev has put this idea of cultural self-confidence as a key to national resurgence?
Hari Om. First of all, I want to thank all the organizers. My pranams to Pujya Gurudev, Swami Chinmayananda ji, all the other Swamijis, Swaminis, who have done mammoth work in this national regeneration. I also thank Dr. Gauritai for suggesting my name. As you rightly said, it is a culture which unites us. And what do we mean by culture? Culture is essentially mind duplicating itself. It is the ideas which are governing life. It is not just, Bahiranga of the culture can be arts and dance and, rituals and temples and all the things are there. But Antaranga is essentially consciousness and the essential values and the tenets with which we are living. So this nation was born with Sanatan Dharma. In his Uttarpara speech, because she mentioned just at the end that it's not the piece of earth but a Shakti. In his speech he says that this nation was born with Sanatan Dharma. With Sanatan Dharma it lives. When Sanatan Dharma grows, it grows with the Sanatan Dharma. When Sanatan Dharma is on decline, it will decline with Sanatan Dharma. And if Sanatan Dharma is capable of perishing, it will perish with Sanatan Dharma. For us, nationalism is same as Sanatan Dharma. We have to be very clear on this. And Sanatan Dharma has been there since the time immemorial, since our Vedic rishis. This whole nation was, Rashtra was born out of tapas of the rishis. That's why we say, Etad deshe prasrutasya sakasha dagar janmana sam charitre shiksheran prithivya sarva manava. So the whole task is that we need to be ourselves that and then teach the people. So the culture comes in that process, that we first become what we are, truly Bharatiya, as Swamiji was so rightly saying. So, and therefore, and after that, we need to get connected with what we are culturally, socially, express that in every thought of ours, every part of ours. कण कण में, क्षण क्षण में हमें हमारी इस धारा की, धरोहर की, संस्कृति की पहचान होनी चाहिए, उसके बारे में सोचना चाहिए. We can't just ignore it or forget it. We can't afford to forget it. So once we put this aside, we are nowhere. We are here because of that. And therefore, Swami Vivekananda says very beautifully, he says that each nation has a mission to accomplish. Each nation has a message to deliver. Each nation has a note to play in the harmony of the nations. Each nation has a work to do. Therefore, from the very beginning, we have to understand what is that message which India has to deliver, what is the mission which we have to accomplish. And in that mission, what note she is going to play in the harmony of the nations. And in that whole process, what is my role? How I am going to participate in that. Therefore, the culture was the vehicle of transmitting and transforming all these things. The abstract values, Sarvam Khalvidam Brahmasi, Shavasamidam Sarvam, all these values, these are the fundamental ideas of our Dharma. But then they have to be translated and transmitted into different forms. Through scriptures first, through the language first. That is the first stage. And the second stage, it will come to the institutions. Different institutions will carry it forward. That's what we understand by culture, right? So, it's rightly said that the culture is basically to find out the key between the harmony of hand, head and heart. That's the heart. And so long as this harmony is there in our rituals, in our theories, in our philosophies, in our festivals, in our dance. Yesterday we saw such a beautiful dance here. So it is reflected in every part of it. But when we look at the part, we should not forget what is the soul of it. So soul is the spiritual. Spirituality is the master key of Indian mind, Sri Aurobindo says. And sense of infinite is native to it. But this spirituality cannot be there in a vacuum. So to support that, India had stupendous creativity. And she created over millenniums in every part, art, architecture, democracy, our model of democracy, politics, which we are going to come to. So economics, trade, commerce, dance, drama, everything we created. And she keeps creating. That's the culture. Essence of culture is creation. Creation is the only sign of life. And therefore we kept creating, extremely creative race. And today we have forgotten that creativity. We have become mediocre. We have become just, others are doing, we are doing. So when Swamiji said, if our goal was only to become a colony of Western world, then so much effort was not required. We could have simply copied what they are doing. Sadly, we did the same thing. And therefore, this revival is required now that we come back to our roots. So, this ideas governing life, which we say a real part of culture, consciousness which is governing life, that essential consciousness is our Bharat Mata and our essential ideas behind it. And that will come through the patriotism, that will come through the nationalism. And I think that's what got the whole crux of the thing. And this Tyagabhumi, this is a Punya Bhumi. This is a land where wisdom made its first home before it went to any other land, Swamiji says. So this land has got temples, the yatras and the tirtha kshetras and the rituals and festivals. This is an external part of culture, which of course we should preserve. We should not keep it away from our mind. But that should not become only external, for our hands. It should go to our heart and our head, and it should become part of our soul. So this external part and the internal part of culture, so long as we are preserving, Sanatana Dharma was on ascent, and we were, as a nation also, we were ascending. And when it started declining, we also started declining. But it will never perish, because just to add to that, Swami Vivekananda says, shall India die? And then he said, if that happens, then from the whole world, spirituality will be extinct. Sweet soul sympathy for religion will be extinct. All moral perfection will be extinct. And its place will be taken by money as the priest, and lust and luxury as the male and female deities, and human soul as the sacrifice. So Indian culture means all these things according to me, not just the external part of it. And then further he adds a small line, he says, such a thing can never be. So let us be assured it's not going to happen. We are going to be there. We are Chiranjeev Rashtra. We are the people who have been the Ajinkya and the Avijay Rashtra, Mrityunjay Rashtra we are. So we are not going to fall down, because this Dharma is eternal, Sanatan, it's not going to get perished. If it is not going to be perished, we are also not going to perish as a nation. But provided we first become Bharatiya, we first understand that. Not by Aadhaar card. Just because my Aadhaar card has got India, I am not Indian. I have to be that. And therefore, I think that's the, in short answer. A lot of other things are there, but I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Another idea that often comes when we read Pujya Gurudev's literature is nation above self. Now we live in a democracy, and we always say that in this democracy, it is for the people, by the people, etc. But all the people are looking at some other people to come and change. But here is where I think Pujya Gurudev's fundamental point lies, that nation above self should be the key to change the civic responsibility of people. We have with us Raghavji, who is expert in public policy and governance. So the right question to you, I feel, would be how this nation above self can be that key.
Hari Om. It's a very emotional moment for me to be here. It's in many ways the birthplace of my engagement with Indian knowledge systems and my life's inspiration. So thank you. Very grateful to all the Swamijis and to all the organizers. I think we'll have to deliberate a little bit on the idea of civic nationalism, because civic nationalism sits very uncomfortably with the Indian consciousness, because it is a post-sacred kind of idea. And Swamiji points this very, very deeply. He says that is because we have a congestion of the lung, but the cultural heart is still beating. So when we talk about civic nationalism, we'll have to look at the Western history and some of the ideas that we've unconsciously adopted. Now, the idea of civic nationalism comes because the Western tryst with religion has been traumatic. For them, they were beaten both by the god and the scientist. For over 600 years, from 1000 AD to 1600 AD, West themselves went through what they call the Dark Ages. We've read this in history. So when enlightenment happened, and when the indomitable individual spirit started questioning and rising above, they felt that that religion did not give them succor. So they shifted from the sacred to the secular, to the scientific. And Swamiji points to this. And he also alludes and also acknowledges the greatness of that transition, but he also points to the limitations. And therefore, when the exchange of God of religion happened with the God of reason, you had a 200 years of great scientific flourishing. And it is then that the Indian mind, also because we were in a dialogue with that civilization then, and we've imported those cultures, those institutions, those structures, those modes, and those cognitive elements of our thought, we are now asking this question of what is it that can bind the nation? Can that be civic nationalism? Civic nationalism in the Western world is basically a horizontal association which does not have the sacred. For example, you can be a rifle association, you can be a carom board association, and that is because they did not want the state to have anything to do with religion, and they did not want anything for religion to do with the society. Now, this is a conundrum that is theirs. We are importing it lock, stock, and barrel without too much of critical thinking, obviously because of the hold that we've had and the structures and thought. But fundamentally, when you look at it from Gurudev's idea once again, the congestion of the lung, once that is cleared, the heartthrob that's happening in the Indian culture will flourish. So this is not just a civic nationalism, this will be a sacred civic partnership. And that is what he talks about. And if you look at this, the sacred is at the core, and he points to this very, very poignantly in his speeches. And he says, without the ideology of a moral guidance, without the sacred grammar, without having something that binds for people to surrender with devotion, you will have the gunman with the gun on his shoulder and a hammer in his hand, and he will go and change the world. So when we talk about civic nationalism, we are not talking about the material knowledge system-driven civic nationalism. We are talking about something that comes from the sacred grammar. So for us, the idea of self and nation are not different. When he says nation above the self, he's saying self, sacred, and state have to be in harmony. And the self, when it expresses itself in the Indian context, in the Hindu worldview, is automatically, like Sir said, Sanatana Dharma is Indian nationalism. It will already be nationalistic. So I think we'll have to go back and look at critically where we are drawing these ideas from. Civic nationalism for us cannot be divorced from sacred.
Wonderful. I remember one quote from Swatantravir Savarkar. In Marathi, he says, देहाकडून देवाकडे जाताना मध्ये देश लागतो आणि त्या देशाचे आपण देणे लागतो. I'll translate. When we move from attachment to body to pure self, in between comes the country. And we owe a lot to this nation of ours. I think similar idea we see in Puja Gurudev's thought also, and as Swami Satmananji mentioned, that Chinmaya Mission pledge itself is a complete model for patriotism. And one very powerful line that we always say in that is, service our country is the service of the Lord of Lords. Devotion to the people is the devotion to the Supreme Self, where spirituality, religion, and patriotism he puts in one line. So my next question to Anuradha ji is, this Chinmaya Mission pledge and the significance of it, the philosophical side of it, how will it shape the Indian consciousness or Bharatiya consciousness, if I have to put it, how this Chinmaya Mission pledge can become that model? And I request if you can display the Chinmaya Mission pledge also.
So thank you once again. I would like to start by reading the quotation that I was hesitating earlier on and then connect it to this pledge. So Sri Aurobindo says that Mother India is not a piece of earth. She is a power, a godhead, for all nations have such a Devi supporting their separate existence and keeping it in being. So when we start by looking at her as a mother, and when we look at the Chinmaya Mission pledge, which says that we stand as one family bound to each other with love and respect. Now this can only happen when it's not this French idea of equality, fraternity, and equality, liberty, and fraternity. It's not an intellectual concept. It is a deeply experiential understanding of the interconnectedness of everything. Not just anthropologically, not just of human beings, but of the entire creation. Because we are made of that one Brahman consciousness. So if that is the source of everything, this first line that says, we stand as one family bound to each other with love and respect. And very beautifully, it does not make any kind of distinction. Because like sometimes people do an exercise, if you were wearing a quantum lens and looking at the universe around you, none of those boundaries would make any sense. And therefore, the only thing that would spontaneously emerge is a natural experience of love and respect for the other individual's being, because just as we have the right to be, everybody has the right to be. And therefore, like Raghavji was also saying, the civic nationalism is not just a matter of, word, it's not just a lip service, but it is deeply embedded in the very psyche of this nation's spirit. Then he says, we serve as an army, courageous and disciplined. So this also, and that entire line where he says, ever ready to fight against all low tendencies and false values within and without us. So growing up, we actually recited something very similar at the ashram, where we are saying that in order to experience or in order to live up to that expectation, we have to first and foremost admit our own limitations and that requires courage. That's why the ashram life, while for the others it looks like a very peaceful experience, is actually fully ridden with conflict for anybody who has taken it up. It's a very, very courageous step to put on the ochre garb or to become a brahmachari and all, because now it means that everything that we took for granted, that ignorance is bliss that Anandji was saying, is not our own story. But the fact is that the moment we want to look at ourselves, it is a very courageous act. And I'll summarize it with one word of the Vedas, which is the word Arya. The word Arya, as Sri Aurobindo translates it, comes from the root Ar, to fight and to cultivate. So one who's ready to fight the inner battle is the Aryan. One who's ready to fight, to cultivate the inner soil and grow the seeds of divinity is the Aryan. So that's why in the Vedas they say, Krinvantu Vishwam Arya, make of the whole world Aryas. So that is implied in the second line where he says, we serve as an army, courageous and disciplined and ever ready to fight against all low tendencies, false values within and without us. So look at light as light. Asatoma sat tamasoma jyotirgamaya. Let us look at the light within the darkness. Okay, not just away from it. Then he says, live honestly the noble life of sacrifice and service, producing more than what we consume and giving more than we take. So this is, I think, the basic, even Swami Dayananda of the Asha Vidya Gurukulam says, he says, while if you're only in the taking mode, you're like a child. But if you become an adult, then you have to start giving back. That is a mark of an adult, not your age. So this idea is very important. And then we seek the Lord's grace to keep us on on the path of virtue, courage and wisdom. Naturally, the whole Rita Chit, how do you stay to that which is right? That is very important. And that as being a core. So in Bharata, we didn't talk about, the end goal was not important. Like we've become outcome-oriented. We were never outcome-oriented. We were process-driven. How do you get it right? Just do it right was our goal. So this keeps us on that. So that's the highway. Then he says, may thy grace and blessings flow through us to the world around us. Also here, I'll just very quickly close here. So he says that this is, if you look at the mantra which says, Sahana vavatu sahanau bhunaktu. It does not say that I will be together, we will do. It says protect us. Even asato ma sad gamay. It's not that we will go from here. It says lead us from here to there. And we believe that the service of the country is service to the Lord, because if we do that, if we just reconnect to that light, we grow the light world over, and therefore we know our responsibility. So just to close here, I got this kind of an idea. Like in the Taittiriya Upanishad, they have the different adhikaranas. So I said, let's create this Deshadhikarana. And what would it look like in the light of the pledge? So it would be Athadhi Matre Bhumi Bhaktihi or Athadhi Matre Bhumi Pujanam. Okay, so this is what is this Adhikarana? It's about how do you do the Matre Bhumi Pujanam. So it says, Adhyatma Jivanam Purva Rupam. So the spiritual life has to be the Purva Rupam. Then the Sanskriti Palanam Uttara Rupam. The other end has to be Sanskriti Palanam. Then Atma Samarpanam Sandhihi. We have to offer ourselves and that becomes the connection. And what's the action? Nishkama Sevanam Sandhanam. So how do you do it? You have to do selfless service to everybody becomes the connector between it all. So, and when we can do that, at the end, we see that when soon after independence, we were Paratantra. We were Nirbhara. We were dependent on the others. So we were Paratantra. We were dependent. Then we moved towards a little bit. In the 1980s, 90s, we said, no, we need to become more independent. So we had this small Atmanirbhara Bhava. We moved towards a bit of Swatantriya. Then we said, no, with Modi ji and this government coming in with more of this idea of, Rashtra Bhava. So we said we have to become Atmanirbhara. Let's produce and make in India. We do all that. So boldly we are stepping onto this world stage to say we are who we are and unapologetically who we are. But I think what Swamiji, what Gurudev and what Sri Aurobindo and all our seers really called upon us was to become Atma Bhara Bharata. When this land we become Atma Bhara, then we will have Purnata Siddhi, or the fullness of what the civilization represents, not just for our own people, but for the world at large. Thank you.
Wonderful. I think this Adhikarana is very beautiful. I loved it. Now here is another aspect that I always wonder, that many times when we talk about nation, we don't realize how and when we become political. But when we read Gurudev and his literature, he was very clear about nation, and his concept of patriotism transcended actually the political ideologies, yet remaining nationalistic. Because nowadays what has happened is you stick to your political ideology so much that you don't realize how you have gone against your own nation in trying to please some politicians. So Gurudev, he was beyond the political ideologies, yet very clear what ideology we should have so that we will not go against the nation. So this is where I have to ask, how much important it is to have that kind of nationalistic approach, which will be beyond the political ideologies, yet very, very nationalistic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very pertinent question because we are in the world today where most of the time is consumed by politics. If you open any channel and most of the news will be about politics, as if nothing else is there in life except politics and crime. You see the total news, these are the filled with these two subjects mostly. Or some very odd things, something which happened, never happened. But coming back to the point, I look for this answer, I look back to Pujya Swami Chinmayananda's, what he has given us as a mantra. So as I understand it, and I could find out 3 or 4 pointers. The first was his work of revival of temples. I mean, let us look how he looked at this whole idea of nationalism, politics and dharma and other things. So I found these few pointers. He was so good, so active in revival of the temples. He was the person who was the force behind Vishwa Hindu Parishad. So we see the way he worked for this unity of Hindus and making them aware of what you are actually. So that has come some of the major things which he did. And apart from that, as I know, because I come from Vivekananda Kendra, Kanyakumari, so Vivekananda Kendra Rock Memorial, he was one of the guiding force behind it. So perhaps few people know it, but we have seen it. There is a Gangotri exhibition. I invite all of you to come to Kanyakumari to see it. The story of Rock Memorial book is also there. Swami Chinmayananda was consulted by Eknathji Ranade when the Rock Memorial plan was made. And he saw the plan, he approved it. Also Paramacharya Chandrasekharendra Saraswati approved it. He went to different people. So as I said in my earlier part, spiritual masters in this nation are also the people who have guided nationalism, and in fact they have guided entire society for different, now this was the task of regeneration after 62 war. So people needed something to hold back. Therefore, when 1963 Swami Vivekananda's centenary came, birth centenary, they started this Rock Memorial. So Swami Chinmayananda is one of the guiding forces. This is a very significant thing. He knew the far sight of his is really great. Third thing is...
If I can add one more thing in that, we have one very interesting letter that Puja Gurudev has written to Eknathji
Yes.
when he is not well. And he bashes him, saying that how can you not take care of your health when you have to serve the country? We need hundreds of Eknath Ranade to be there for the country.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, this is that motherly care which he, being a great guru also, his heart, we are coming to that point. Why he could have that type of association, and that's why he guided Eknathji. Eknathji did mammoth work, but there are forces like Swami Chinmayananda and Shankaracharya and other people who have guided. But third thing I found is, then as Swamiji so beautifully put, some things I was not aware. He said his revolutionary time, he even had being very active revolutionary. And then there was a point about Hindu vote bank also. So when we think, people like us think that there is a difference in all these terms, our masters don't think any difference is there. They can, at the same time, they can speak of vote bank, they can again speak of Saman Nagri Kaida, they can speak of the Rock Memorial, they can speak about the Vedanta. because there is basically no contradiction in that. It's all for our dharma. Second point I found is, his definition he said about patriotism, he said, it is about love and pride for your country. Swami Chinmayananda's one, whatever I'm reading after association with all of you only, I'm understanding. But love comes from emotion, he says. Love comes from emotion. And emotions are very important. When we say about Rashtra and the Matrabhumi and all, na, heart should stir with emotions. How Bankim created that wave with the Anand Mat. How the Vande Mataram became mantra of India's renaissance. It's the heart. So that is the first point. Love comes from the emotions. But pride comes, Swami Chinmayananda says, from the knowledge and experience. This is a very beautifully, I thought these 3 points are very important for us to understand patriotism and also answer this question. Because if you want to have a pride, you should have knowledge. That's what you should study all these things. Unless you study your own dharma, recover Vedanta, Upanishads and Gita, recover not only in your intellect and emotions, but also recovering then your experience. So that experience, live it in your life. So Sanatana Dharma is nothing if it is not lived. Religion in India is nothing if you don't live it. It is in acharana. It is to show people that we are doing that and then make them do it. It's not in sermonizing as other religions are. So this experience, experiential part of it is very significant. And he gave that mantra. Love, pride comes from knowledge and experience. Third I found is that he has already made it happen through so many institutions. Now the entire this vision of what today we are seeing here, we were also in CIF and we saw that entire setup here, this we are seeing. It's not enough to only talk of patriotism and nationalism and dharma and all. Creating institutions, creating work on the ground, making it happen in the real world. Now, one of the way is all these educational institutes which are working so wonderfully. I mean, I bow down to all of them here. So the great work they are doing. All about Gurudev's vision, I mean, they speak and it happens. It's like that, isn't it? So that is the thing. And apart from doing all these things also, he's so conscious that what is going to happen to us politically also. He's not keeping himself aloof from that. So, again quoting Sri Aurobindo here, he says that the task we set before ourselves is not mechanical. It is moral and spiritual. Task which have set ourselves before is not mechanical. Please remember that. It is moral and spiritual. Of this task, politics is a part, but only a part. This task has got politics. We can't do, recently we just got from, his keynote was so beautiful, I thought I don't have to add anything. So Swamiji was, every point he put so beautifully, sir. So he was saying that Bengal elections have again proved India's renaissance happened from Bengal. From Bankim's Anand Mat and the Swami Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo and all these people came from there. And such a land was today, for so many years was in the, in the grip of the devils. Heart should burn out for this, We should feel what is happening to my Bengal, what is happening to my Bharat Mat. And now, because of political movement only, we could able to snatch it back. Of course, the further work is more that we need to establish our part, otherwise we are going to become the same party like the other party. We have to be, in real sense, party with the difference. We can't be only party and party, because otherwise we will be... So politics is a part, but politics should be then continued with the other reforms which are there. So we don't talk of politics alone, we don't talk of, I'm just quoting from Karma Yogin, that we don't talk of politics alone, not talking of economics alone, not talking of social reforms alone, not talking of any this or that institutes or other reforms, but of that which is covering all these things and rooted at all these things, and that is again Sanatana Dharma. So unless we go back to that, what we are doing also in the Bhishma and the other places, we go back to that Sanatana Dharma, bring it back to the people, to all the masses. Otherwise it will not happen. From that, political also will be one of the part of it. So I think these connections, we have to be very clear. Thank you.
Thank you. So many brilliant ideas are coming out in this, and I'm loving this entire conversation. Sometimes I forget that I need to host also. See, another very great thing that, thank you, Narendra ji was mentioning, that our great masters who have come in the past have given such a great vision to us. Be it Swami Vivekananda ji from Bengal, be it Shankaracharya ji and Gurudev from Kerala, The same lands, when we see going through so much of difficulty, the heart pains. So it is our responsibility, the responsibility of all of us today, to go back to those masters, see their vision, and take it in our own life. One of the brilliant things, couple of times Anuradha ji also mentioned, and we see in the Vedas also, is the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, where the nationalist concept doesn't become anti-national towards other countries. Many times, when you say, I love my country, doesn't mean I hate other countries. And again, this we see in Puja Gurudev's literature, that his idea of patriotism went much beyond the border of the nation. And it actually went, and that is where the fourth pillar of Chinmaya Vision program also lies, that is universal outlook. That don't just get stuck with the idea of nation, also expand it and say that this is now extended to the entire world. Yatra Vishwam Bhavati Ekanidam. That concept. So my question is, how much important this concept of going beyond the nation also and seeing the whole world as one is required, and how Gurudev brought it?
So again, I think it'll be useful for us to also examine the origin and the philosophy these words carry. When we talk about nation and nation state, clearly it's an evolution of the history that the West had, and we've imported these categories again. Bharat Gupji says this very well. He says, ethnic is Europe's other. And all of the fundamental construct on which nation states are born today after Westphalia is one language, one skin color, one race. That is because that's how they've organized their society, and today the world is organized as that, and that is also coming under a bit of duress. So when we talk about nation, we talk about, that's why our languages are so critical, right? When we talk about nation and when we say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and we also have to keep in mind the Hitopadesha version of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, because the world has real politic and we have to understand and engage, just like Gurudev did. But I think this idea of nation as an imagined community that, that comes to us from the Western political philosophy does not sit very well with the idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam that we have. The vision that our seers have when they talk about that is the oneness, the universal oneness. But we have to deal with this in the contemporary context, and I think it's useful for young students also to understand how to situate these lofty ideals in the reality of the political grammar that you have today. Now, when you look at the nation-state struggles, we are in the 5th month of this year. We've already started 4 wars. And this is what Gurudev meant when he said, the Western man actually carries the hammer in his hand and the machine gun on his shoulder. We have to understand that because the thought there is coming from a very material knowledge system. So fundamentally, the conflict is between a material knowledge system and a sacred knowledge system. And you cannot have a Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam unless the spiritual philosophy goes first, right? That is the idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam in the spiritual sense. But in the Niti Shastra sense, we also understand how and when this was used and how it can also be used to con, right? So the challenge, once again, this whole concept of nationalism, patriotism, we are having to rethink, because it is only for Indians that we have this peculiar situation that we simultaneously live on 2 different registers. There is part of our world which has significantly changed. We speak in English, the institutions are obviously influenced, but there is also the continuity of our traditions. And unless we have the ability to cognitively rewire, there is going to be schizophrenia. And I think it is this schizophrenia that Swamiji was absolutely pointing us to. And that is why he says, and it's not just the lofty ideals. What moved me when I read Gurudev was his thinking about the individual self-selection process. And he says, you cannot have a nation unless people self-select themselves into the values. And that is why he talks about Usha. He says that nation building is basically the rising of the Usha. And how do you do it? We've discussed the storytelling, the institutions, and all of that. But I think it's very important in the contemporary world, because we're being made to believe that this is a global world while you're having national wars, right? So in this context, if you are not able to engage with young people and give them a sense of how to self-select into the value, then the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam becomes a decoration, not a deep understanding of what it is, and that is dangerous, because a lot of our people also go into the world with this naive idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It is the spiritual code that needs to be recognized while also being very clear about the nation-state politic. So if you look at the self-selection and if you look at the cultural trend today, the universal religion, in my opinion, of course, we have organized religions, we all know the challenges with that, but there is also a different challenge that we face in the technological world today with a liberal philosophy, that people have self-selected into one life. The fundamental idea is that I only live once, and therefore I have to maximize this by consumption. Therefore, you hear cultural vocabulary like fear of missing out. So when we say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, without the entire metaphysical architecture, it might actually do a disservice. The point I'm trying to make is that it's important to look at Gurudev's vision in its entirety. Don't be a la carte picker, right? Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam does not really mean that you don't understand yourself. And that is why he binds the state, the secular, and the self together. He says, without a state, there cannot be prosperity. Without the self, there cannot be beauty. Right? So he's binding beauty, prosperity, and identity together, and that is very important for us to recognize. Without that, we are self-selecting into a one-life metaphysics, which means that anything that offers overall sort of show of being liberal, people will self-select into. So I think we need to have clarity about what Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam means, and then bind the secular, state, and self together. That is Gurudev's vision as I see it.
Brilliant. Many times, coming towards the conclusion of this, many times many of us feel that we should do something for the country, and I always remember as youngsters we always say, let us do. But what to do is not really clear. So that is why we must study Gurudev's text, and he has given very clear plan. And as we have discussed in this panel also, be spiritually rooted, be proud of your culture, and be practitioner of your religion. Keeping nation in mind. If these 4 points, if we can remember, be rooted in the self-knowledge, in the spiritual aspect of it, be proud of your culture, the oneness that unites. And Gurudev often used to say, India is a very interesting country, which has 40 countries within itself. What binds us together is that culture. So be proud of that culture, be practitioner of your tradition and your religion, keeping the nation in mind. So if we can do this, I think it would be a greatest seva to our nation, our motherland Bharat, also to the entire Guru Parampara, which is for us Gurudev. So that would be wonderful. With that, we will conclude this panel, and thank you very much to the wonderful panelists here. Thank you for bringing so many beautiful ideas. Thank you all, audience. Hari Om.